stage of using a government-issued ID, for instance? I mean, should Australians be prepared for having their faces scanned to use social media?
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's podcast. Tonight, I've got some really special guests. They're well-respected biodynamic farmers, authors, and musicians. Kelly and William Newton-Wordsworth, welcome to tonight's podcast.
Thank you, Leon. Thank you very much.
I've only just met you yesterday, and we've had a really fascinating conversation, and I'm sure a lot of people that are watching tonight already know you, so you really need no introduction. But I thought it'd be a good idea to have you on tonight's podcast, and you've got quite a story to tell. We've got a lot of topics to cover, including your biodynamic farming, which you're very passionate about. You're passionate about your faith and your music. As I've mentioned, I'm sure there's a lot of people on tonight that have already know who you are. But for the benefit of those who don't, if you could just give us a little bit of a intro, especially around how you got into biodynamic farming, what motivated you into that, and what drives you.
Do you know, it's so interesting because I often say morning tea is very important. And I went to morning tea at my mum and dad's house, and my auntie was there, and she said, "Oh, did you see the show on the Four Corners about this man putting cow manure into cow horns, and he's farming with no chemicals?" And I said, no, I didn't see it. And so we started to find out about what's called biodynamic agriculture. And there's a man who, before he passed away, he was the editor of the biggest organic magazine in America called Acres USA. And he said in one of his last interviews, it might have been his last interview, he was asked by a journalist, what's the future of agriculture? Is it organics, composting, whatever? And Charles said, it's biodynamics. And he said the writings of Alex Podolinsky are worth more than they're more than gold. And that's the man who was on that show, the one that my auntie told me about. And we were just about to get married, and on our honeymoon, we drove all the way across the Nullarbor to see him, but he was too busy. to see us.
So many people wanted to see him after the this program on the ABC that people can still see. Probably you can find it online. It's called A Winter's Tale, and it was his story, which was fascinating because he was actually Russian, and he came to Australia as a refugee after the war because the Germans got hold of him and put him in the German army, and he was sent him to the Russian front to fight his own people, but he was fortunate not for him shot in the head, and found his way back from the Russian front before they all got caught in the snow and never reappeared again.
He was shot in the head.
And at the end of the war, he just selected, or despite coming from aristocracy, he selected the place furthest away from Europe in the theatre of war and came up with Australia. And he is one of the main pioneers, if not the main pioneer, of bringing biodynamic farming to Australia.
Yeah, and I'd love to say that his grandmother was the grandmother to the last Tsar of Russia. And what happened, the reason he got put into the German army was because their family went on holidays and they just went into Germany and they closed the border, which is something that we now understand a little bit of the feeling.
That's
certainly
right.
in Western Australia, certainly in Victoria.
That's right.
All over Australia. But yeah, they couldn't get out. And the Russians, even though he was Russian, the Germans put him into their army and then they headed to Russia. So, he got shot in the head, through the head, and he survived. And he was a student of Rudolf Steiner, and who, he wrote huge amount of books, and he was like a mystic, I believe he was really seeking God for answers. And the farmers of Europe came to him and said, "We've lost all the fertility in our soil, and we really ask that you'll help." And he came up with this thing of putting cow manure into cow horns, burying them under the ground during winter, and then you take that substance, which has transformed from just cow manure into what is called 500, because it has 500 million living bacteria per gram. So just one handful mixed with water is enough to activate 1 acre of land. So it's one handful to the acre. And what it's doing is it's bringing life to the soil in this way that, people just go, how does it work? Once I was speaking at this kind of festival about, looking after the earth. And this man just kept putting up his hand saying, "But how does it work?" And in the end, I just had to say, look, nobody knows. It works. We've been doing it at that stage. We've been doing it for 20 years, and we've now been doing it for 36 years.
Wow.
So the fact is, we've been doing it since 1988. So the fact is, we have not put on any superphosphate or any chemicals. I don't believe that land ever had chemicals. We had to have it tested, and it all came back with 0 chemicals. So it's very beautiful land with the life that's come into the soil over 36 years, and people come and they just say, "Wow, this is paradise," and it's because of the life in the soil. That's it, isn't it?
How long have you been in farming for? Is this many generations?
Well, I came from a farming family. Kelly didn't. Kelly was, really came from a family steeped in culture, and her grandparents started
That's why I'm a culture
WA
artist.
Symphony Orchestra, and they really were brilliant Irish bloodlines, musicians and geniuses, and one of the early actors, famous early actor, author in Blue Hills, all sorts of things. So Kelly came from the city and from culture. It's a bit like the story of the Geebung Polo Club, isn't it? And I came from Tasmania originally, but my parents, like a lot of people, came to Western Australia because it was the last frontier in the 60s, and they could sell a small farm in Tassie and get a much bigger farm. The only problem was it was all bush down at Esperance, and they got it for $2 an acre, but you had to clear it and you had to be a pioneer. So they went and took our family to Esperance on the south coast and of Western Australia, and which is attracted some very interesting people from around the world, including people like the Rockefellers and the Luces. All sorts of people went there. So that's where I sort of grew up, but ended up going away to boarding school and that sort of thing. And we don't live there anymore. We actually farm in a place called Williams, which is about 2.5 hours south of Perth, and inland a bit.
I'm seeing a couple of comments here in reference to bees. We'll get to that in a moment and the significance of that, I guess. I mean, I don't know much about farming, but I've heard a lot about bees and what they've been doing to bees lately. But why is biodynamic farming? How would you describe it for a simpleton, for a layperson, and why is it important, particularly for today's times?
Well, I'd love to talk about this because, you know, and really in regard to bees, I think the bee question coming up is just perfect, because the long and the short of it is that since we've been in farming, the chemical use, and I mean poisons, pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, side means death, so things that kill, products that kill things, have just grown exponentially, particularly since the Second World War. But in the time we've been in farming, you could probably say a third of farmers have been moved off the land, one way or another, sold out, whatever, but because of economic pressures. And the way of farming has gone from being quite a kind of a genteel way of life in some ways, but it's much more now very chemically orientated, huge amounts of poisons used. And in broadacre farming areas, I'm not talking about alternative areas like Margaret River in Western Australia and around vineyards. I'm talking about broadacre areas where the bread of Australia is grown, like the grains, see huge amounts of chemical use. And some crops like canola are sprayed, you know, maybe up to 6 times with a mixture of different things, lots of pesticides. It's quite a weak crop. And we've got this day and age now where we know farmers with $1 million chemical bills. That all is poison that goes onto the land and down the river to places like the Mandurah Estuary near Perth, where people go crabbing. And so you've got this big change in farming, and tying it into the bees. We've been very proactive about speaking out about chemicals because someone has to. So we've been doing this for
36 years,
for a long time. And then GM came along, and we started speaking out about GM. But one of the things I like to say, which I think puts this in perspective, along with, you know, the fact that some farmers won't let their children or visitors go into crops that are so poisonous at times, is the fact that all around the world bees are dying off, which the person who asked the question probably wants to know about. And it's largely being, you know, there are all sorts of people studying bees. Bill Gates is buying up bee research companies, or was.
That's interesting.
Don't mention.
I wonder why he's so interested in bees.
Yes, he probably wants to genetically modify them to spread chemicals or something. But the thing about the bees is what it's really being linked to, the culprits included, you know, Wi-Fi towers and all the different things. But really, the real culprits emerged as farm poisons and GM, because most GM is about putting the chemicals into the plants anyway, like a toxic soil bacteria that then it's expressed even through the pollen, but also with the sprays. And we know this in our area. If people have got beehives around a canola crop and the canola crop sprayed with insecticides near flowering time, we know of people who, you know, they've lost all their bees because the bees like the flowers, and they all die. So all around the world, bees have been getting weaker, and they've been getting this varroa mite, and they've been dying. It's linked a lot to chemicals, and people have said to us through the years, usually as an organic farmer, you use a lot less inputs, but you produce more. You produce a bit less in the way of outputs, but you use vastly less inputs, including chemicals and fertilizers. And a lot of the sort of criticism we get from the sort of scientific brigade is usually to the effect of, well, the world will starve if everyone went organic. It's not true at all. Organic intensive farms are probably the most productive in the world. The Amish are an example. But the point about it is that I like to say, and then I'll stop, is that I believe the way we're going with the high chemical use in farming, the risk is more that if we keep pumping on the chemicals and the bees go extinct, then the real threat of food shortages rises and potential famine. And so this is, to us, this is really important, this thing of chemical use. And today, obviously, Bobby Kennedy, fighting to be the head of Health and Human Services, he's very aware of this, and it's part of the big contribution to the 54% rate of chronic disease in Western industrial countries.
They've also, I mean, bees, you mentioned that they've been inadvertently, they've died or becoming more extinct as a result of all of these chemicals, but they've also, it appears that they've been deliberately killing bees as well, going onto people's property. I think I saw a video that went viral on someone's farmland in Australia, and they exterminated the bees. Why do you think they're doing that?
Because we can't live without them. So, I mean, if we want to go deeper, we were talking about this last night, Leon, and, you know, most people on certainly things like X or platforms around the world, they know that people like Bill Gates, he is actually a eugenicist, and he said in 2012 on a TED Talk that we need to reduce the population of the world. And he said, you know, well, the way we can do it is through vaccinations. And then another way they can do it really is through killing all the bees, and the chemicals just kill the bees. And I wanted to say, I love lots of the questions in the comments, or the comments. I'd love to address some of them, but I love bees. I have always loved them, and I'll just save them out of pools and, just have them on my hands, and I'm not scared. I never have been scared of them, and they don't sting me. But I did really, I didn't learn quite enough. There's a lot to learn with bees. But we got some bees and our own hive, which was like one of those, not the old-fashioned ones, a newer one. But because I was a bit nervous, and I also was kind of doing the puffer thing, which was in summer, and I just thought, oh, this is a bit dangerous. So I kind of let it go. And then by the time we got back from where we were going to, all the bees had flown away. But now we actually we had lots of bees before, but we've got like thousands and thousands of bees. And we also have other birds and animals coming to the land that we live on, and we see creatures that we've never seen before, because it's like they know that this is a haven. It's a haven in the world, and we're the longest running broadacre biodynamic or organic farmers in Western Australia, and we're the last of the beef, the growers of beef or biodynamic or organic beef in, certainly biodynamic beef in Western Australia. I think someone might have just started again, but it's been it's a big journey, because there's a lot to learn, and there's a lot that people sort of get to the point where they just go, oh, it's just too hard. And, you've got people who spray chemicals, but we are in a very amazing area, because it's very, very rocky. So it's real cattle country, and it's a perfect place, I believe, to be doing biodynamics. And it's a very exciting journey. Every single day is so exciting, because we learn a lot. And someone was saying, how can they deal with weeds without glyphosate? It depends.
Karina?
Yes, Karina or Corinna. There are lots of ways that Steiner worked out to deal with all kinds of things. There was a thing that happened where people were complaining there were too many rabbits, and it might not sound very nice, but he came up with this method of dealing with the rabbits, and the farmers would kill the rabbit and then skin the rabbit, and that skin dry, and then they'd burn it, and then they'd take the ash and mix it with water and spray it around the place, and all the rabbits went away. So then all the people were complaining that they had no rabbits to eat. So that's called peppering. But can you talk about when you did that peppering with the...
Yeah, I mean...
That was amazing.
There are people obviously in this scientific type of age that if you talk about things like that, they would just consider you pretty mad. And when we started biodynamic farming, and we're talking about the bacteria in the soil, that was considered mad then. So I didn't, and there are people who wanted to fight me just because we're biodynamic farmers and we were so different. We didn't grow up in the area, and we were pretty different. I didn't used to tell people what we did a lot. We did share it, and we ended up having field days and things. But when we started, and we did this, we had a particular weed that was being quite difficult, which is dock, which is a sort of it's an annual weed, but it's a relation of sorrel, which is a herb, and it does have a use. But if there's too much of it, it's not what farmers like to have, sort of thing that some farmers would go and spray. So in regard to that weed, I decided I would do the peppering. And the peppering with plants is to take the seed, burn them at the time which is the best time. That's another subject, but a lot of the things are astrological. And so you tend to plant at the best times for the particular crop you're planting, and peppering was the same, but I go by feel on that. So I burnt all these seeds of dock, and I went and sprayed this 100-acre front paddock of ours, which had all this dock on it. And you can see it because it's got a different colour to it. And I never told anyone outside our family. And the man who drove the fuel truck, when they deliver the fuel truck, there's this farmer who was a dyed-in-the-wool farmer, but his part-time job was delivering fuel. And I happened to be near the fuel bowser, and he rolled up with the fuel to deliver it. And he had this laconic Aussie way about him. And he leans against the fuel bowser and he goes, "Yeah, William, why'd you spray that crop without the front that's dying?" And he was talking, all that dock out the front that's dying. And I looked at him, I said, "Des, if I told you, you'd just about fall over." And he said, "Try me." So I told him, and he just about fell over because it's outrageous. Really, it's homeopathic, but it really worked. And it doesn't mean it always works, because we've got another really difficult weed, and that has a different solution. We've had to sort of plough that one. And the thing is with weeds, you've just got to deal with whatever it is. If it's an annual, you might mow it at seeding time. If it's this thing we've got that's difficult is a toxic bulb, and it has lots of seeds and bulbs. So we've had to buy a disc plough that turns the land over, kills the plant in spring, and the bulbs go to the surface of the land and dry out in the sun. So they don't, if you just leave them in the ground, they all come back the next year. And we've developed this way, which is we're killing that plant, and even chemicals have, it's difficult to get rid of that plant with chemicals. So there's a few chemical farmers pretty interested in what we're doing with that one.
Yeah, and I just want to say that with biodynamic agriculture, there's just this whole completely different mindset, because we are looking for solutions in, like Steiner had lots of solutions, but you just keep searching, like with the weed that William was talking about. That is something that many people spray, but it doesn't go away. But this last year, our son Vincent actually, he ploughed a lot of it up, and it's just died. So, and you plough it because it's a bulb, and it also spreads with seed. So he got it at the right time, and it's just gone. So it's very, very, it's very interesting. But someone, Zelda, I think, put a comment about what can she do to encourage bees into her garden. And a great thing is biodynamic, because the thing is it's so powerful for the soil, so the plants grow really strongly, and the flavor of the food. Most international chefs that I've spoken to, that as soon as we say we're biodynamic farmers, they just go, "Oh gosh, I want to come to your place and taste all of your food," because the actual food has massive power because of the biodynamic way of growing it, with the life force in the soil, so it goes into the food. It's phenomenal. And when everyone here that we're talking to right now, and anyone listening later, will know what food grown with superphosphate tastes like. That's why when people taste our food, they just go, "Whoa, it's just so amazing." But coming back to the bees, I know from the bee course that I did that bees do love yellow. They love yellow flowers. And unfortunately, that's why they really go for the canola, which then the farmers are spraying that with atrazine, which has been banned worldwide. The farmers in Western Australia are anyway. They may have stopped recently, but yeah, they're still using things like atrazine. And when I was at the bee course, the man looked very sad, and he just said, oh, one of my dear friends, he asked the farmer, please let us know when you're about to spray and I'll come and get all the hives. And the farmer didn't let him know. And every single hive, every bee was dead,
Wow.
and that's, like an income for him of about $100,000 for the year. And that was gone in one spray. It is unbelievable. It is.
Can I just say to Zelda, something that we do, which we really love to do, we love planting plants, particularly, trees. We plant a lot of trees, but we really, for the bees and the birds, it's the little bushes, the grevilleas and the thick bushes. And every year we plant different ones and we get a few more. It's not some massive scale planting of those. But what we find is we just get more and more little birds and more bees, and we sort of stagger it to just try and get them so there's always something flowering. If you plant all the same one, you just have sort of like that window for a month or two, but we just keep getting flowering shrubs that flower at a different time. So that makes a big difference, and we've got lots of little birds, and this brings us great happiness, actually.
Yeah,
you said something profound yesterday. Oh, sorry, go on.
Yeah, go on, Liam.
I was going to say, yesterday you said something profound, because I always associated allergies, and I mean, for a lot of people that are awake, in the freedom movement, associate allergies and autism with vaccines. But you said something very profound, and you said that it also relates to GMO food, which is almost 99.9% of the stuff that most people, the average Joe, eats on a daily basis. Can you elaborate on that, please?
Yeah. Do you know something? I'll tell you a little story about this, but GMO food's not most of our chemically grown food is. There aren't many organic or biodynamic farms in Western Australia. There aren't many in Australia, really. It's a very small percentage of the total amount of food. So most food in Australia is grown with chemicals. Some of the chemically grown food is GM. Quite a bit of canola is, and so canola is not a great oil to be using. In fact, I'd avoid it totally, and lots of chemical farmers say that. So one thing I'd love to say, though, to share is we grow lots of different things. We grow, we've got cattle, we've got sheep, we've got tree crops, we've got olives, table olives, oil olives, pistachios. We've got mixed orchard for self-sufficiency. We've got a horse stud. We're the opposite to sort of doing one thing and just making that's what the whole farm's about. So it's a full array of colour. But we used to also milk our own cow. So not as a full-on dairy. We've only ever had a cow or two for our own purposes. But my mum would be allergic to milk, and she'd have a cup of milk and start sneezing. And so I did an experiment where I took her a cup of our biodynamic milk from our cow and gave it to her, and there was no allergy.
And we also had.
And, we found as well, we had an orange orchard and we developed marmalade. And we were, our marmalade was selected on taste by one of the finest shops in England called Harvey Nichols. And then Harrods wanted to buy all our products, but they wanted to call them Harrods products. Our olive oil, they tasted 20 products in a tour around Australia and took 2 of ours out of all the places that in every state people came and pitched their products. And the thing about it is, it's not because we're geniuses at making marmalade or at growing beef or at growing olives. It's the way of farming, the naturalness of the biodynamics does this for us. But
Can I just say something? It's not just the naturalness, it is the living bacteria.
It's the life.
Like, people go on about gut bacteria, and you've got to, like, it's really important to have good gut bacteria. Bacteria is way underestimated in this world. One of the things that's driven me really mad over the years, like, I was singing at Live Earth in Los Angeles in 2007, And I was invited to go to Toronto to sing with Al Gore. And I'm very grateful that didn't work, because apparently he had Sheryl Crow and they'd already signed a contract. So I wasn't allowed to go. They weren't having any other artists. And I was so grateful, because I really didn't know much about him in 2007.
Now
and
you
I know
do.
it's, you know, like, you have to be really careful. And I mean, he wrote that book, An Inconvenient Truth, and I call it a convenient truth for Al Gore, because he gets to fly around in his private jet, and he's paid $500,000 to go and talk about, you know, like something that's just so obvious. And I was invited to sing for the opening of the documentary, An Inconvenient Truth, in Bangkok. And I was sitting there watching the documentary, and I was so furious, because nobody in the documentary mentioned the chemicals that kill the bacteria in the soil. Nobody. They all talked about fossil fuels. I mean, hello, you can work that out yourself, really. But it's just this thing that many people don't understand, that living soil, the living soil is the thing that takes in the carbon dioxide, transforms it and brings it back to fresh air, along with, you know, forests and the trees. But it's just, you know, I remember reading something from the Carbon Farmers of America, and this was in 2009, and they said if there is any such thing as global warming, then it would be potentially the biggest cause would be the destruction of the bacteria in the soil from modern conventional agriculture, which just actually sprays out billions of tons of the worst chemicals, you know, every single year. I've been doing research, and it's almost hard to bear. But when people talk about not having any bees left, you know, not many bees in their garden, maybe it's just something where you can actually get a small hive and just, you know, really plant lots of annuals. But someone mentioned, you know, you haven't mentioned grevilleas yet. They are amazing. Grevilleas are amazing. And the bright yellow flowers, that's what the bees really want. You know, they get drawn to the yellow flowers. I don't know why, but I've seen it myself. Someone told me that. And then I was watching or looking all around to see what flowers they really love, and they go for the yellow flowers. So even if you just have little yellow daisies and yellow roses and yellow, you know, it may just really encourage them.
There's a question here. So they're asking, you don't have any health issues. I don't know if you want to, I'll leave that up to you, whether you want to answer that or not. You look healthy to me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, we do pray. We pray about everything, and we pray for our health. But I must say, we did go to a naturopath that we had gone to like in about 1900 and something, maybe 1990. And we only went back to him like about last year. And he tested these levels for chemicals and vaccines and all these things. And he just went, wow, you guys, both of us, the levels that we had, he was just blown away. And I said, well, we did become, you know, we do now pray a lot, you know, and we've become Christians. And we also, you know, eat mostly biodynamic and organic food. And when we sit down to eat, most of that, like I cook from scratch. I love cooking. So we have fresh eggs and meat, and, you know, so we do sit down to pretty much just about everything that we've grown. We don't grow rice because it's not a rice growing place, and we don't grow wheat. But, you know, most of the things we have on the table, one, we've made everything from scratch. And the other thing is a lot of it's come from our place. So we're very excited about that.
We work at that.
Yeah, we do.
We grow vegetables, Nat, and I just encourage anyone to grow a few veggies and just make a little start somewhere, even if it's you know, a few lettuce and a little herb garden somewhere.
Do you do any lunar planting is one question. I don't even know what lunar planting is. You mentioned something about astrology before. Is that related to that?
Yeah.
Well, sort of. We're really, I mean, Rudolf Steiner was very much like he works out, he has this way, but it's not really like astrology as in predicting the future or anything. It's really just looking at the times of the month where the moon is. It's very fascinating because, you know, a lot of people have experimented with this, and the planting of the actual seeds, like the vegetables that grow above the ground, you actually plant those seeds as the moon is rising, and the potatoes and things that grow under the ground, you plant them as the moon is going towards the dark moon. So it's not that complex, really. And lots of people say, oh, you know, you do all this stuff. We don't do all this stuff. No, we just do biodynamics.
We go largely by feel with that. You know, I do feel people just can really get that feel of, and the instinct of just when they're prompted to plant certain things.
Before I ask my next question, if you can all head out to CLO Social and watch this stream there. It's a great initiative that Michael has set up, Clo.social. So with all the chemicals and the poisons that they're putting in, what is it? I mean, you mentioned eugenics before, but what does this come down to? Is this just incompetence? Is this by accident? Is it by design? Because it's causing all of these issues: autism, cancers, allergies, including anaphylactic shocks, which is also caused by vaccines. What are we dealing with here?
Well, we're dealing. As I think I was mentioning to you yesterday, it's very parallel to the experience we've all had with vaccines. Basically. And when I say with vaccines, particularly with the COVID vaccine, it's so similar to that. I mean, that vaccine, I think, is generally agreed to be a GM vaccine anyway, a GM product. And so, and it's obviously got toxicity. Well, it's very clear that the farm poisons are toxic. On the barrels, they've all got poison signs on them. But what happened is the same as the vaccine schedule. When we were children, there were a few. Now there's about 90. And then we find out they've got nasty additives like aluminium and mercury. Well, in farming, there were not so many chemicals used. And now, you know, there's just more and more and more. Someone was telling us the other day that what used to be the agriculture department is just, they've got a chemical they'll tell you to use everything, for everything, like kill the grass with this, and then protect the seed with some seed protectant, and then when they grow a bit, you need to spray them for some bug, and the list just goes on. And all of a sudden, farmers who may have, you know, used chemicals once a bit, suddenly the boom spray is a huge item, and they're spraying everything, and it's a real issue. And there are chronic diseases. Talk about chronic diseases. You know, in the farming areas, there are lots of people getting you know, well, the usual diseases that are showing up, like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. You know, we've had two neighbours with Parkinson's. There's one place at a nearby town where I think there are 4 or 6 neighbours that all had Parkinson's. It's linked to a chemical, a particularly nasty chemical that a lot of farmers, you know, people hear about Roundup getting phased out. Well, what's happened is Roundup, actually, I don't think Monsanto minds phasing out Roundup because it's not a particularly nasty chemical.
It's run out of its patents.
And it's
anyway.
run out of patents. So what's happening is farmers are starting to substitute in nastier chemicals. So they're mixing in a particularly nasty old chemical called paraquat, which is really deadly. So they're like becoming alchemists. They're putting 3 lots of different chemicals in the tank, you know, to make something sufficiently nasty to deal with the weeds that have become resistant. And we have organic farming friends in Western Australia who were both hospitalised by their neighbours spraying with chemicals, and the spray drift came and got them, and they both ended up in hospital. And nobody's, when I say nobody, it's like no government agency's particularly interested. They've had no justice, and to get justice in the courts is, you know, as Kelly's been saying, put to a lot of people. She was told by a lawyer who's succeeded in getting justice in Victoria for some people, well, you need about $1 million in the bank to kick that legal action off. So these are very, very, you know, these are very big things. But the answer to it really is it started small and it's been getting bigger, same as vaccines and pharmaceuticals. How did we get to this point where when you speak to a lot of old people, their biggest conversation is about what the doctor and what drugs they're on, and a lot of old people are on a host of drugs. That I'm sure wouldn't have been the case 30 years ago, 40 years ago. And it's just that we've got these industries, and it's the same players in both of them. The chemical companies and their first cousins, the pharmaceuticals, they are pushing this in the same history. You know, they send agricultural scientists to schools to educate people, and they push it. They are pushers, and they educate people that way. And when we started farming biodynamically, people were sufficiently, I suppose, brainwashed that they told us that our farm would be barren in 10 years. And it wasn't barren in 10 years. So but it's the mindset. And that is just from the education and the pushing of the propaganda that happens.
So we're being assaulted on all fronts, essentially.
Yeah, we are. And look, I've been doing a lot of research about this, and when I started finding out about Henry Kissinger, I believe most people on this, listening to this and making comments, I believe most people will know about something about Henry Kissinger, but he started working for Nelson Rockefeller in 1955, and farming had nothing to do with chemicals prior to the Second World War. And Henry Kissinger came out with his parents from Germany in 1938, and he was 15 years old, and he went to Harvard University and he became a professor of economics, and he mentored Klaus Schwab for 50 years. And the thing is, if anyone knows of the Bilderberger group, he was in that. He was also in the Club of Rome, and he was known to be really working towards depopulating the planet by about 95%. It may have been 87%, but who's counting? And so that was back in 1955. So then there's a book called Silent Spring that I was talking to you about last night. But that came out with the release of DDT. All the birds, all the bees were dying everywhere, and it took till 1972 to ban that chemical. But actually, it's very interesting because the marketing of DDT, they had drawings of it, like little girls playing in the sprays. They were like cartoons, and it just said DDT is so safe you can drink it. And that was the exact same marketing for Roundup. And there are actually, Monsanto is the company that has been doing this. I don't know who started Monsanto. I haven't actually researched that yet. But Henry Kissinger was known by people when he was at university. His main topic of conversation was world order. And he had this absolute obsession with depopulation. So the first things that they were, coming from the German scientists who were, Bayer made the gas that gassed all the Jews in the prison camps. Bayer has now bought Monsanto for $66 billion a few years ago. But the thing that people just don't really understand is that, we've met farmers who just say, you're mad. What you're saying is not possible. You cannot grow food without chemicals and all these inputs that people use. And how did they get that? Because prior to the Second World War, all farming was organic. All. Like nobody would have even called it organic. Everything was just
farming.
It's just farming. It was just growing food with things like cow manure, sheep manure, whatever manure you could get, composting. Nobody used chemicals until after the Second World War. And the person who went to work for Nelson Rockefeller, one of the wealthiest people in the world, Henry Kissinger, was obsessed with world order. And one of the things he wanted to do was depopulate the planet so that, the wealthiest people in the world could take the resources from all the different nations. I mean, look it up. If you don't believe me, someone made a comment saying that, the whole thing of organic farming and praying sounds like a cult. Well, I can tell you something from having been a biodynamic farmer for 36 years. The biggest cult in farming is chemical farming, because if you don't use chemicals, you are out. In a town like the town we have lived in, for 37 years. We got married at the end of 1987. We were totally like pariahs because we didn't use chemicals. Our son went to play in the football club. It's like, oh, you don't use chemicals, you effing whatever.
Really? It's that bad? Wow.
Our
Unbelievable.
children, well, nobody knows unless they've done it. It's like people who, have been in sort of all sorts of situations. Unless someone else has been in that situation, they have no idea what it's like. But in the town that we have been in, like even our eldest daughter, when she went to school, she was 6 years old, and, children wouldn't play with her. And our son was told just recently, after all these years, that his dad said, oh, don't play with her. They don't use chemicals. It's like they're just these weirdo biodynamic farmers. It's like that's what we've endured that for all these years. And also we've been real activists fighting to stop the logging of our karri forests, which were being turned into toilet paper for Japanese people, and people going, oh, why are you down in the forest? It's like, oh, it's really just such a crazy world that people just, happy to just cut down all the forests and poison all the land and the water. And, one night I was at a book launch, and this guy, said, oh, well, we're biodynamic farmers. He goes, yeah, I know who you are. And I said, oh, do you? And I had no idea who he was. And he goes, oh, well, each, we use chemicals, each to their own. And I just went, no, it's not each to their own. What you're doing is you are spraying chemicals that are not just affecting your place and your soil and your water. It's going all the way down the river to the sea. And it's blowing out. Spray drift is huge in the bush. Apparently people in the countryside, I researched this as well, it's 3 times the amount of cancer in the countryside. It's just huge. There's a town that I talked to, a lady, who lived in a town in Western Australia. She said every single person in the town had cancer or has had cancer. So why are people not working this out? It's like, it's just insane. These chemicals, chemical is a nice name. They're actually poisons. There was an article on the ABC Rural in July 2021, and a farmer in Queensland had one tiny little drip of paraquat go into his lip, and he died that day. Wow. And paraquat is the most commonly used herbicide in Australia and America. And there are all these lawsuits in America, against people who are using paraquat. But with Roundup, the first person to sue Monsanto for Roundup causing cancer, he got a judgment that gave $700 million in damages. Then Monsanto fought that, and they brought it down to 70 million. The next couple who came, they were awarded 1.2 billion. The next people were awarded 1.4 billion because they'd had cancer from spraying Roundup. And now Monsanto, this is probably a year ago, they had 50,000 cases pending in the courts, and the people, the big guy, the head of Bayer was laughing, saying, oh, we can handle this. Well, I don't think they were expecting 50,000 cases. And these people have they've just gone and made all these chemicals, and the amount of cancer, if you're eating food that's been poisoned and you're breathing air that's been poisoned, then what's going to happen to you? That's most people in the world now. That's why we've been fighting for, 36 years we've been fighting this fight, and it goes on.
What you just said is just so profound, because I didn't realize how bad it was within the farming community that you would be ostracized. You were treated exactly like the unvaccinated were treated.
Exactly.
And there's another parallel as well, because you mentioned to the other farmer that it is a big deal that you're using chemicals because it affects the whole environment around him and even further. And when the vaccinated get the vaccine, they're spreading it. They're going around, they're spreading it to other people, the spike protein. Sorry, you were going to say, William?
Well, it was quite in a sense, it's just so similar. And in regard to this, I think we're all aware now that since COVID and since widespread vaccination, the vaccinated have unknown consequences. The thing is, on this day, I keep coming back to it, with Bobby Kennedy seeking to be head of Health and Human Services, his passion, apart from pharmaceuticals and cleaning that up just by some obviously brilliant strategies, like first just getting rid of this immunity from liability in the vaccine makers, brilliant. But coming back to Bobby Kennedy, he's got a passion for clean green agriculture. He's also been involved in cases where people have been poisoned on the land as well. And that's a twin passion. And just as a bit of explanation about that from a farming point of view of what is, if you look online, you can find the data, but there are places where they've been monitoring the blood of people, and in the blood, urine and breast milk of people, farm chemicals just keep rising because more and more of the world's food supply is grown with chemicals. And this, whilst we're in a pharmaceutical experiment in a way in the world with over 5 billion people vaccinated, the world is also is in an experiment about the long-term effect of poisons on people, because there's never been a time where there's more and more glyphosate and there are more and more common farm chemicals in blood. That's what we're in, and that's why this thing of Bobby Kennedy getting into this position is really important, because coming back to something else we were discussing before, really there's just been, when you said, what's this thing about depopulation? There's very little concern about it. We've been talking about it for years, and it's very hard. We'd go to Perth for a rally to stop GM, and there'd be about maybe 100 people there, the same people who come along. And there was at the same time a rally down the road to save the great white sharks, and there were 5,000 people there.
6,000.
And I looked at it and thought, wow, the great whites take maybe a person every year or two. It's not to be scoffed at. I don't like great whites much myself. But what I'm saying is it's nothing compared to what's been going on in farming and the level of sicknesses that are related to poisons. So this is really, it's just this thing that, maybe what Kelly's talking about with Kissinger, it's the same thing we're fighting with vaccines. There hasn't been a lot of caring. I couldn't believe the level of opposition that today that I saw to Bobby Kennedy. There are people who are on the take from pharmaceutical companies, and they're not particularly concerned about the 54% chronic disease rate. And there are people who are heavily into using poisons and selling them. They don't care when you start telling them about some, person who's getting diseases and there's an increasing disease rate. They just will put it under the carpet because they want the high production. They want the money that flows with it. And, this is a very interesting thing. And just to come to the comment, you said there was a comment about being maybe a cult between, being into biodynamic farming and well, I suppose God. I want to say something that I find quite amazing. There's been a couple of posts recently about Amish people. I don't know Amish people. There aren't too many in Australia. I'd love to go.
I guess they're the placebo group, right? In the controlled study.
Yeah. But what a placebo group, because they eat organic food. They're the most productive farmers, by the way, in America, generally known as, because they really work together. High productive farmers. But the fact is they eat organic, clean food, and they don't get vaccinated. And apparently autism is virtually never occurs. And I mean, compared to a 54% chronic disease rate with skyrocketing autism, it's the whole thing of looking to God and doing what he says, which, you know, he's led us into farming biodynamically. When the vaccines came out, you know, we weren't anti-vaxxers. We just sat down and prayed about whether they had the vaccine. We asked God. He said no. And all I'm getting at is, I don't know why the Amish people don't have vaccines, but someone's asked God and he's told them no. And I look at it and I think, wow, if it's a cult, I'm proud to be in the God cult, because he's given us, you know, I would much rather be growing clean food and not poisoning ourselves, and have our children and visitors to the farm able to go out in the crops and have more and more bees and flowers every year. It's, you know, it's a pretty great cult to be in. I recommend it heartily.
Well, what would you say to people, the average Joe on the street who's watching this, who can't grow their own food? They're city slickers. They're dependent on the supermarkets, going to Coles. What is your advice to them? And that they want to avoid, now that they're learning about this for the first time. I'm sure a lot of people that are watching this aren't, but there are a lot of city slickers on this program that might not know how to grow their food. What's your advice to them?
Do you know what? And I know it probably may seem to some people, oh, well, it's easy enough on a farm. What I like to say, our son's about to get married to a Fremantle girl, and Fremantle's a suburb of Perth. Thank you. And she was telling us her last three letters of her name are Ich. So she comes from, you know, that sort of Croatian background. And she was telling us about her Croatian forebears. And on a little suburban block in Fremantle, I forgot what she said, but the guy had, like, you know, 40 or 50 different types of fruit trees, and he grew so much of his food. And what I'm getting at is, you know, you can make a start in your own. A lot of people have a garden, but the other thing is community gardens. We used to, you know, go to a market and sell different of our products at a community garden in Perth, and you know, and there are people there who made garden beds on top of bitumen. So often there are places where you can get involved in a community garden, or just start with a garden somewhere, or come up with an idea and put it out to the community, and someone might just donate a garden. But there are people are doing this, and it's a fun thing to get in with it. In our local town of Narrogin, there's a community garden, and a lot of areas have got them. I see them around. So my advice is get involved, and you'll have people in there who love to, you know, teach people how to grow things, and go and get sort of recycled wood chips from the prunings, and you can literally build a garden bed using permaculture methods on top of a road. It's really exciting what people are doing all over the world, really, and all over the cities and in the country. And, you know, a lot of farmers these days don't do much gardening, don't grow much fruit. A lot of farms now are very barren, and they just grow lots of crops with lots of poisons. And people with a beautiful, maybe with a block or a community garden in a way, get their hands in the soil a lot more than a lot of farmers. That's
what about meat?
Sorry?
If someone wants to eat good meat and good dairy, what would your suggestion be for that?
Well, my suggestion is to get biodynamic or organic meat if possible. And the big thing is grass-fed. Grass feeding, the work of the Western A. Price Foundation is quite fascinating. But they discovered that the fat of animals that eat green, like grass or seaweed or whatever it is that's green, the fat contains this key vitamin that releases a lot of other vitamins. It's very important. And that's why grass-fed meat is considered next level by doctors like Dr. McCullough, who's, you know, was a key doctor. He's written books against vaccines and things long before we knew about COVID. And, you know, he talks about grass-fed meat, organic or biodynamic meat, being equivalent in the amino acid profile to wild salmon. So high quality, a lot of cattle and sheep are fattened on grain, and it's unnatural for them. If you can get grass-fed, even if you're not buying organic, if you can get grass-fed, it's better. If you can get organic, that's good. And it may be better to eat a bit less of something of higher quality, or have meat less often, but have better quality. And it's the same with organic food. You know, something like rice is not that expensive. So to buy organic rice doesn't make such a big difference. It's worth buying, even some food organic.
And there's a comment here. I think someone just wanted to say hello to you from 20 years ago. So I just thought I'd just bring that up. Yeah, saying
Hi,
hi.
Sachi.
Hi.
Now,
Long
you're
time no
also,
see.
yeah, 20 years is a long time. You're also a very talented musician, Kelly. So tell us a little bit about your music career and what inspires you, what keeps you going with your music.
Well, it's changed a lot, and I don't really sort of see it as a career. I had a very powerful spiritual experience in 1988, which changed my life forever. And I really, I read one sentence in a book where it said, it wasn't a Christian book, but it said, the writer said, Jesus said, if we will obey God, we can do what he did and even greater things. So I just literally walked outside and I gave my life to serve God and ask him. I said, tell me what you want me to do for you and I will do it. And a voice started to speak to me immediately, and that voice has led me to have an extraordinary, amazing, wondrous life. But everything, like the next day after that, I was jogging along the road and it was out in the bush, and a voice shouted to me from behind me to stop. And I stopped and I looked around, there was no one there. And then there was a 2-meter tiger snake coming across the road in front of me. So
Wow.
I had never seen a snake in my life, except on TV and in the zoo. So I always believed that I would be terrified, but actually I was in awe because all I had in my mind was how can it move? Because it's just like gliding, So I wasn't terrified, but I just knew that because I gave my life to God the day before, the next day when that voice said stop, if I hadn't stopped, I would have trodden on the snake, or I would have frightened it, or I would have gone in front of it, and in which case I may have been bitten and dead in 4 minutes. So nobody would have found me. I mean, maybe it would have been 10 minutes, but it's not a long time that you have with a tiger snake. And it was, but I wasn't afraid. But what I knew was something amazing had happened to me. And I ran all the way back home so fast, and I grabbed my guitar and I wrote the first of what I call the message songs. I was not interested ever in becoming a Christian. I wanted to find God. So at that point, I just was so excited. And I wrote this song, which had a totally different mind. Like it's called Song of the Bush. And it goes, if we don't stop this way of living where we are taking without giving, one day there'll be silence there in the, worldwide. Like if we don't stop this way of living where we are taking without giving, one day there'll be silence. And I knew this was huge because the sorts of songs that I was used to write, like pop songs, You're the Untouchable Man and things like that. So this was totally new. I had never, ever, ever had anything like that in my mind before. So I knew something huge had happened to me. And then, I just started to write these songs like When We Were Young, which was about taking all, we took too much more than our share, poisoned the air, we didn't care. These songs, you can see that song on YouTube. And then, what is songs about the whales, and just, so I don't consider what I've done since I gave my life to God is a career. It's I really gave up my life to serve God, and then he brought me to actually experience and meet Jesus. So I became a Christian, but it's just I live a spiritual life. We live a spiritual life, not like going off to church or we just God told me in the year 2002, he said, I don't want you to go to church anymore. He said, I'll show you my church. And my church has no walls. And it's where two or more are gathered in the name of my son. And he said, you know, to start this church, which is really a relationship. So we have prayer with people from all over the world. We pray for people, they pray with us. Even during COVID, you know, people from India wrote to us and said, please pray for us. My parents have got COVID, so we prayed for them. They were healed. And then, you know, like just different people. We have many, many, many different stories to share. But I have to say that is very different to what I would ever have imagined when I was, you know, I mean, I became a lawyer. William and I went to law school together. I became a lawyer and then I got out really quickly, but I then went and worked full-time. I worked full-time professionally as an actress. And then in 1987, you know, we got married in a fever, hotter than a pepper sprat. And we, and then, you know, in 1988, I had this huge spiritual experience. So from that time, you know, people have said to me from all over the world, who's your manager? You know, because I've been guided to go to Thailand. I ended up singing for the King of Thailand for his 80th birthday, and there were 500,000 people.
That's incredible.
At the palace. And I've been to the palace lots of times, and I've been to see the King's Seed collection, which is phenomenal. But, you know, like I could go on, but it's really, it is a spiritual life. And I've been, you know, someone said to me, oh, Kelly, you know, can you just write a song for the forest? Because we've been going down to the forest, just staying there for days, protesting, and the loggers would come and the whole forest, like that was, you know, like just written up in Time magazine as an environmental hotspot for the whole world. 1,800 species of plants and animals, and we'd be there and it would just all be so beautiful, and then we'd come back and it was all clear felled, you know, and so we've seen a lot of, you know, destruction. So I wrote this song called What Is Happening to Our Forests, and I learnt a lot because I realized people don't listen at all. Like they'd say, oh, that's a nice song, and I'd say, did you actually listen to the words? And they're going, oh, anyway, we got this footage of all the devastation in the forest. You can see this on YouTube as well, just called What Is Happening to Our Forests. And as soon as we had that footage, it was taken and it was just shown to, like, you know, we had nobody who cared, and it went to 89% of the population in Western Australia calling on the government to stop the logging. And it's a long, long story, but we ended up saving about 1.5 million hectares of our forest. So, that's profound. You know, that it is profound, but what we learned was you've got to show the pictures. And that's why I've got my songs like Enough is Enough and Hold the Line. You've got to show people what you're talking about, because otherwise they just don't even hear. It's very amazing. Some people do, but that's usually a poet or someone who's into words. So it's but the thing that you said, how's my career? It's really just going where God wants me to go, and he literally gives me the songs. You know, he really does. Sometimes he wakes me up at 3 a.m. and I go, oh, this is going to be interesting. And then there's a brand new song by the time William gets up at 5.
I'm just posting in the comments section all the links to your channels and videos, and encouraging people to go there. If you can take a moment, guys, and check out Kelly's wonderful work. So I'm just putting it into all the comment section here. Is there anything else that you would like to share with our audience tonight?
Well, I just wanted to say something really about GM, genetically modifying any seeds, and it's the same with the mRNA vaccines. People who believe that these things are good, they need to learn. You need to really do your research, because William was writing a column in our local newspaper, and I was writing things as well. But this, he wrote this thing about GM, and you know, and people said, oh, what are you talking about? It's been going for thousands of years, and there's only one reason for genetically modifying anything, and that's so that the company that genetically modifies it gets the money. They own the seed, they own it, And the big, really huge evil that's going on with this GM anything is that people actually are really, these companies that make the GM seed, they're the ones who get the money from that. And the problem is that once you genetically modify a seed, you can never, it takes over from the sovereign seed. That's what people don't realize. No genetically modified seed has come from thousands of years. It's come from about 2000, probably 2000, something like that. It's only recent, and it's done by scientists in a laboratory, and it is so dangerous, and we have to continue to fight it, because there are people who just, in places, in positions of power in nations like the FDA, are the people who go, yep, we'll bring on all that GM seed, that's fine. It's when we were fighting it, William was on the Shire of Williams, William from Williams, and he actually brought a moratorium to stop the growing of any genetically modified crops in our district. And we were the first town in the whole of Australia to have a moratorium. And after 18 years of keeping GM seeds out, we were invited to Parliament to really thank us for the work that we had been doing for years to stop it. 2009, Terry Redmond, who was at that point the Minister for Agriculture, he went on a trip to America and Canada with Monsanto paying for everything. And he came back and he just goes, we're going to do GM canola. And we had a market that was worldwide because of the Nullarbor, because it's quite a long way for a GM seed to blow over. But he just...
GM-free market.
We had a GM-free market worldwide, and people from Japan, all these people who wanted GM-free food, or like crops, were very excited about Western Australia. And one minister, he did the deed, and he said, no, we're doing it. Nobody, I know people who were in Parliament at that time, they had no idea how he even managed to get it done. But GM canola was brought into Western Australia, and genetically modified canola is modified so that it can live with Roundup being sprayed over it. So now where all the councils in Western Australia spray Roundup to kill the grass on the side of the road, there's GM canola growing all along the side of the road, all over the highways, the byways, all over Western Australia. And that's it, can't go back. And the thing is, it's a brassica. So is it possible for GM canola to then sort of go into, other brassicas like broccoli? So we then have GM broccoli. But this is a very, very huge subject that's kind of been forgotten. And then now we have mRNA vaccines. And I actually heard that Pfizer bought an arm of Monsanto, which would have been the GM part, I believe, in 2005, which I found out from a lady who was running for Parliament. And so I'm not sure about that. I did look it up, and it was there on, the platform that I looked it up on. But it's serious. This is our life. This is our future. And these people just go, oh, yeah, that's fine. And there's an amazing documentary, and it's called Genetic Roulette. And the subline is taking the gamble of our lives. And it starts right at the beginning. America, bountiful, healthy. And then it's going, oh, really? And then it just shows all this stuff that's been happening. And that's quite an old documentary. But what it does, one of the most powerful scenes in the documentary is a mum talking about how she just gave her son dinner, and what she thought was normal corn was actually genetically modified corn, and he almost died from it. He had a fit. And wow. I heard Bill Gates the other day saying, oh, I've been eating genetically modified corn for years. Well, since he was a boy? It didn't exist. Didn't exist when he was a boy. It's existed since, I'd say, maybe the mid 70s or 80s. More like the 90s, yeah. So I just wanted to throw that in to just say to people, please don't give up the fight to stop GM, because no one knows. There's no scientists. I had an argument with a scientist when William was doing these huge debates in front of 1,500 farmers, and he was debating against, the people fighting for GM.
All these people who had doctorates who were being paid large amounts of money to be there wherever we went. And, it was really on for young and old. But what just to add to what Kelly said, actually, there's a very, very wonderful online newsletter that you can subscribe to for free out of England. It's called GM Watch. And if you Google GM Watch, they're just so onto it, and they're brilliant, these people. But I will say that there's a push all over the world to deregulate genetically modified food. And at the moment, I mean, having had Jacinta running the country and some of the dreadful things that happened during the pandemic in New Zealand, she's gone, but that government she was in is still in power in New Zealand, and they're about to deregulate GM in New Zealand. Now, what that means is that if you go to buy corn and it's GM, it won't even be labelled. And they're saying that that it's all a lot more precise than it used to be, and it's all safer. It's absolute rubbish. It's
the opposite.
More precise. It is a completely imprecise science, and it's as precise as their safety about their experimental vaccines. No one, they didn't know what was happening there, and they don't know what the long-term consequences of this will be. So in whatever country or whatever place you're in, Australia's got to be onto this too, if we want to be able to know what we're eating as to whether it's genetically modified, because there are people who want to genetically modify fish, animals, tomatoes, cucumbers, everything.
No stone left unturned.
It's madness because they make money out of it, and I really Kelly's written a song which is a real pandemic anthem called "Hold the Line." You may have heard of it. "Hold the Line" is like an anthem against holding the line against the evil that's been going on in the pandemic, and I just hope and pray everyone that we'll all hold the line against whatever is happening that we know is just evil, and GM is, as far as we are concerned in our experience, very similar to the pandemic. It's unknown consequences, and we've got to hold the line against that as well, and just make sure that we do our best to stop it and have it labelled.
I've actually just posted that here, so people, if you can click on the link, listen to Kelly's song. There's actually a question in relation to a book. You did mention that you were writing a book, William, yesterday. I don't know if it's directly related to that, but someone asked, I think it was Kylie, asked about if you had a book or info on how to grow a biodynamic farm at home. Would love to learn.
Yes, we are. Do you know, it's taken a long time to get to this point, but we are actually putting this book together now. So be beautiful. If you want to contact us, you can contact us by email. My name, Kelly Newton-Wordsworth @gmail.com, or william@williamsriverproduce.com.au. And actually, I can probably just type that in the comments. But yes, are you wanting to finish coffee time now?
Go for it. I'll give you the floor to type in and say whatever you want. I can also put in, I've got your email info. Is that from your website as well? It starts with info. Did you want me to post that as well, or?
I do. I'm not sure. That's probably not the best. We're not too great on the whole email thing.
Our website's very out of date, but it's actually there's a website we have called williamsriverproduce.com.au, but it is very out of date. Very out of date.
We have so many things that we're doing. It's a full-on life. I'm just writing this in here now. williamsriverproduce.com.au. We
are going to have a book about called A Biodynamic Life that we're really sort of going to do together, that we've talked about for a long time. Kelly actually does have a book called "This Is Your Life," and it really is. It was described by one reader. It's online on Kindle, and one reader said it was the best sort of motivational book of its kind she'd ever read. So that's, it's
Wow.
really, it's a great book. And I've got a book I've been working on for the last 3 years, which is actually about God, but in reference to the pandemic. There's a lot of reference to the pandemic because
it's amazing.
It's
it really is.
And it's not all religious. It is actually about the reality of God, Jesus, the Holy Spirit, Satan, and even evil spirits. And we've had experience with all of them. Not to be recommended experiences with Satan and evil spirits, but we have, it's a spiritual book, but it's about reality. And yes, I recommend it, but I mean, if people, and I was totally anti-God because I had it shoved down my throat at boarding school for, having to go to church 4 times a week, 5 times a week, and it was just, I was so anti-God and anti-Christ, and then I challenged God one day, and he put 240 volts of pure power through me. And I just went down to the ground, and then I got up and challenged him again, and he did it again. And that's the sort of what I'm talking about in the book, talking about realizing God's real. And then we met Jesus, but we also met Satan, and we also encountered evil spirits. For people who really want to know about that spiritual life, well, I believe I've got a lady who's editing it, and it's just opened her mind because she actually is diagnosed with autism and has autistic children, and just all the conversation about the pandemic and the chronic disease rate and autism has just really affected her as well. So there are a lot of things in it that I think people would find very interesting. It's called Warnings from the Living God. I've been much warned, so I'm just passing them on, really. And I think, anyway, it's coming out over the next 2 or 3 weeks.
Excellent. Terrific. Is that going to be advertised on your website?
Well, I think we'll advertise it on the website. I've got to learn how to use the website. I'm not so great at websites, but what we will do is we'll probably look. I think it'll come out somehow. We'll advertise it. It'll get on Kindle if people are interested. In about 3 or 4 weeks, if they put Warnings from the Living God in, it'll probably come out. Michael from Culture has expressed interest in us coming and talking about these things. So we'll
sort of a spiritual talking show.
So we'll probably be speaking about these matters with him at some point as well. I just think, I think it will come out one way or another. I'm just wondering
if I hold my phone up to the thing, I just want to show it's a bit shiny, but I'll show a few photos.
It's like a beautiful garden, flower garden.
That's actually if I just sort of do. We're actually at the airport now. We just flew back from Melbourne, so we're sitting in the airport. But just wanted to show you, this is a biodynamic garden, which just shows the life.
That's beautiful.
The life in the plant. There's another one. These are the colors, and there's a vibrance that comes from biodynamics. It's just there's another beautiful one, but it's like, when you go and you see a biodynamic garden, a really biodynamic garden, it's just like a sight to see. I could just go on and on, but when William was talking about what people can do, if you live in an apartment in the city, you can just start with one pot, maybe just get a lovely clay pot that is big enough to grow just a few herbs, like a couple of herbs in a pot. And look, it's great to start getting in touch with people who are biodynamic or organic farmers in the country, and see if we can, start a community you can just, find out who is farming biodynamically and go to the farmers markets and say, oh, where are you living? And, we have people come from all over the world to our place, and it's just something amazing to see the life that's in the soil being transmitted into plants and trees. And we've planted about 100,000 native trees, and they were tiny, like just tiny little things. And people going, oh, why are you wasting your time doing it? But the thing is, that's about 30 something years ago, maybe 35 years ago. It's a forest now. So
Wow.
It's just to be really encouraged, even if you start with one pot on the windowsill, if you don't even have any space for a garden, if you've got light pouring into the window, or if it's even dark, just even look at having plants, small plants. You can buy plants for all different amounts of money, but you can buy a packet of seeds and you can just put the seeds in and watch them grow. I grew up in the city. To me, soil was, just dirty. And now I love, with a massive passion, the soil. I just love it. I love it. And I'm always wanting to find out ways that I can even do more for the soil. And someone made a comment about, maybe some weeds aren't so bad. They're not bad. People have said, oh, what do you do about the weeds? And I said, well, that's our green manure. We'll pull weeds out and we put them in a pile. And in a few weeks, they've just broken, you have worms in the ground and they just eat the green weeds, and they just turn them into compost. It's just so amazing. And if I saw myself 37 years ago, when I was working as an actress, I'd just go, who is this person? If I was looking at my future self and I'm going, no, that's not possible. I could never, ever, ever have imagined myself talking to anyone like this. So it is actually.
So if you have
miraculous.
a moment, be sure to follow Kelly on Rumble. So I've just put it up on display
I'd be
there.
very grateful.
And the link.
Thank you.
And follow. We've also got, if you want to get in touch with Kelly, Kelly Newton-Wordsworth at gmail.com. We've also got William as well. So the emails are all in the comments section. There's a question there in the comments. Do you do deliveries to Brisbane?
Well, not at this moment, because no one's actually asked us before. If you're interested in getting biodynamically grown beef, there's the Demeter, whole, what's it called? The people who do the shop. There are people in Victoria. Biodynamic Whole Foods.
Get some in Queensland.
And there might be some people in Byron Bay and other alternative sort of communities, but it would be great to look up biodynamic food in Brisbane or biodynamic food in Queensland. And yeah, maybe sometime we can do some cryovac beef and lamb and send it over. I mean, that's a possibility.
People come to us to get, they get bulk. Often they have a freezer and they get, a lamb or half a lamb or 10 or 25 or kilograms of beef. And there'll be, in all likelihood, someone in Queensland around you somewhere who'll be organic or biodynamic and doing grass-fed beef. And hopefully, if you have a freezer, you can get some bulk cuts at a really, at a discounted price. That's how we sort of work it. And, if people buy 20 kilos or 25 kilos, and sometimes we've got some people and they buy a whole cow or half an animal and do it in partnership. But I just think there are now, food communities doing this around the place. Just see if you could find someone near you doing that. But there are biodynamic and organic farmers around the place there that should be having grass-fed animals. That I think there was another comment there about grass. What's the difference between grass-fed and organic? Organic is really without use of any poisons. Grass-fed is fed on grass. It's possible that grass-fed cattle can be also on a chemical farm, So ideally, grass-fed, biodynamic and organic. Next thing after that, probably grass-fed. If it's conventionally grown, better to have grass-fed because it's not fed on all the grains, and sometimes they give them penicillin and things like that because grain's unnatural. So the next thing, the cattle are being treated for bloat with penicillin. Grass-fed is really, really important.
And where else can people follow you? I've listed Rumble, your Gmail. How else can people get in touch with you and follow your work? Are you on any other platforms?
Facebook with you?
Well, I'm on Twitter mostly. I'm on Twitter, and my name is Green Rock Woman.
Let me find you, and I'll post that in the comment. Green Rock Woman. Let me just find that, and I'll post that so everyone can.
I'm also on Facebook. I'm also on Facebook, but I'm so angry about Facebook. And our beautiful Michael Gray Griffith has been banned for 10 years, and I hardly go on there. So
10 years in the gulag.
Yeah, it's shocking. And another friend of ours was, she's been banned for life just for putting one post about Tommy Robinson.
Unbelievable.
On Facebook.
On Facebook.
Just, on Facebook. She was banned for life.
So there you go, folks. Follow Kelly on X, Twitter, at Green Rock Woman. So check
William's
her out
on
and her
Twitter.
workout.
William's on Twitter as well.
Twitter. It's slightly embarrassing. I'm not quite sure what the address is, but something like William Newton followed at, and then there's some numbers or something like that. Anyway, you'll know if you find it. If you put William Newton, something like that, it'll come up. I mean, that sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? But I am on Twitter.
Hey, by the way, I've just seen Martin's question. Martin Taylor, if chemicals stay in the ground for years, how does one convert to biodynamic farming? I have a 250 hectares. What you need to do is really get your soil tested, because your farm may never have been sprayed. Our farm had never been sprayed because we started 36 years ago, and not that many people used chemicals 36 years ago. Now pretty much every farmer anywhere is using chemicals. But if you have had chemicals on your land, probably the best thing to be doing is biodynamics, because it transforms the soil. There are experiments that have been done with the Demeter Group in Victoria for years. Like Alex Podolinsky brought biodynamics to Australia 70 years ago. He was one of the people. So the Demeters, I'll just write it in here. Demeter. Demeter.
It's the biodynamic agriculture.
Biodynamic. Biodynamic.
Australian Biodynamic Agricultural Farmers. BDAA. Biodynamic
Agricultural Farmers. Farmers of Australia. Okay. So I'm just going to put that in there. But the thing is, the stories are phenomenal. Like, they've taken things like bright yellow builder's sand and used 500, sprayed 500 on that sand, and it's turned into black soil within 8 months. You know? And things like permaculture. Permaculture is amazing as well. Biodynamics brings the life to the soil, and permaculture means that you can just, like landscape whole areas, you just get cardboard from, your local place, put lots of straw and grass and weeds just all over it. You just keep building and building and building up the soil. I mean, we had kikuyu all over the whole garden. It was, when we came to there was no garden. There were a couple of cactuses in the side garden and this terrible old fence. And we just, over time, just keep doing biodynamics and building up the soil. And now it's like it's just so beautiful. I hate fake, but they are evil. Yes.
Understatement. Before we close off, it's been a really amazing podcast. I really appreciate you've come on. Is there anything else that you'd like to share before we wrap up for tonight?
probably about 400 hours of things.
We could, but I just really thank you for inviting us to come. It's really exciting.
It's been a real pleasure and an honor
to be spontaneous. Yeah,
would you come back on? Will we have you back on again?
Love to.
Leon, you just ask us anytime, and it's been, I mean, it was such an amazing conversation we had with you yesterday. I so loved it, and so did William. And we're amazed to be sitting at the airport, having just got off the plane to come.
I can't believe you. I appreciate your time. I can't believe you actually did that right after a 3-hour flight. So really appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, we really appreciate you, and thank you for having us.
Thank you, and thank you for watching, everyone.
Yeah,
what I'm going to do now is I'm going to play a song by Kelly about the forest of the fallen. This is quite powerful, so I'm going to play that to conclude our podcast for tonight. Thank you so much for watching, everyone, and God bless.
Thank you.
I've traveled across the nation to sing for our freedom. I arrived in Coffs Harbour. No time for vacation. When I walked into the festival, I saw a sight I'd never seen before. A sea of signs waving in the breeze. What was written there I had to see. This was the forest of the fallen. Do you know what this means? In the forest of the fallen, you will see and you will grieve. Every picture told a story of death and injury. From our so-called vaccinations, mandated throughout our nation, there were people moving slowly in the forest of the fallen. I was singing right beside it, could not stop my tears from rolling. This was the forest of the fallen. Do you know what this means? In the forest of the fallen, you will see and you will grieve. The silence, it was deafening. The signs were so shocking. Do you know how many neighbors will never work again, never live again? This was the forest of the fallen. Do you know what this means? In the forest of the fallen, you will see and you will grieve, lest we forget, 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 lest we forget fallen.
But wait, can you hear our children crying? They're calling from all over this land. They're glaring at today's page. Is your Australian